So what did Gandalf get up to in his secret missions to Harad? This is Tolkien Trivia, where I talk about some of the oddities and weird depths of Tolkien's Middle-earth that I've picked up on, and just try to pull at the threads and find out, as far as I can, what's going on. And for me, this is something that came up when reading Lord of the Rings this most recent time, last year. And it's on page 670 of the HarperCollins edition I have in the Two Towers, and it's in the window on the west. And Faramir is talking to Frodo, and he mentions someone who has come to the House of Denethor, previously called the Grey Pilgrim. The Grey Pilgrim, said Frodo, had he a name? Mithrandir, we called him in elf fashion, and he was content. Many are my names in many countries, he said. Mithrandir among the elves, Tharkun to the dwarves. Olorin I was in my youth, in the west that is forgotten. In the south, Incarnus. In the north, Gandalf. To the east I go not. Well, if we've just read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and the Silmarillion, we know many of these names, or can kind of adduce something about them. Mithrandir, Sindarin, Grey Elven, is what he's known by. The elves of the west of Middle-earth. Tharkun to the dwarves. Well, we don't hear that name, I think, elsewhere. And I haven't been able to see an etymology for it. Perhaps you can help in the comments. But we know he's friends with dwarves because he helps the quest for the Lonely Mountain. And of course, the dwarves holding the Lonely Mountain is a vital part of taking away a whole army that could have otherwise have gone to Mirkwood, or have gone to Lorien, or have gone to Minas Tirith. Olorin I was in my youth, in the west that is forgotten. Well, that's the Silmarillion, before he, in the Third Age, is sent as a helper to the Free Peoples. We know Olorin is the most compassionate and engaged of all the Maiar. It says that in the Valakenta, in the Silmarillion. In the south, Incarnus. In the north, Gandalf. Well, we know Gandalf, obviously. To the east I go not. Well, we do hear in Unfinished Tales, very famous bit of Tolkien trivia, that there are the third, fourth and fifth wizards of the five wizards are the blue wizards, and they go into the east and in some sense disappear. Whether they're successful or not, whether they fall to Sauron, is an open discussion. But he says to the south he does go, and he's called Incarnus. We don't hear elsewhere of anyone else going to the south. So Tolkien seems to be the guy, Gandalf seems to be the guy to go to the south for Tolkien. He is the agent of the Valar, helping anyone who wants to help, be free, who wants to do good in the south. And so we kind of know that Incarnus. I think it's an alien word brought in. One possible. This is what the Tolkien brothers concluded about their father's work. It is not a Western or Elvish word. It could be something to do with something like the Latin incantare or another root like that. The nearest thing, a suggestion is that it's potentially a westernization or a cinderization of North Spy, Inkar and Nus from Haradrim. So it's just this is kind of turning one of their words into something that sounds like our words, and it just means he's a guy from the north, a bad guy perhaps. There's one other mention. So we've got the blue wizards going to the east. We know that Gandalf goes to the south, perhaps has an unflattering name. But page 1060 in my edition, Appendix A, Tale of Arwen and Aragorn. This is Aragorn speaking. Aragorn took leave lovingly of Elrond, and the next day he said farewell to his mother and to the house of Elrond and to Arwen, and he went out into the wild. For nearly 30 years he laboured in the cause against Sauron. And he became a friend of Gandalf the Wise, from whom he gained much wisdom. With him he made many perilous journeys, but as the years went on he went more often alone. His ways were hard and long, and he became somewhat grim to look upon, unless he chanced to smile. And yet he seemed to men worthy of honour as a king that is in exile, and one renowned under many names. He rode in the land of the Rohirrim, and fought for the Lord of Gondor by land and by sea. And then in the hour of victory he passed out of the knowledge of men of the west, and went alone far into the east and deep into the south, exploring the hearts of men, both evil and good, and uncovering the plots and devices of the servants of Sauron. Thus he became at last the most hardy of living men, skilled in their crafts and lore, and yet was more than they, for he was elven wise. So the relevant thing here is not that we hear about Gandalf's activities themselves, but we hear two things. Aragorn apprentices with Gandalf, increasingly though he travels on his own. We hear of some of that. We know of his reputation amongst the Rohirrim and amongst the Gondorians in Lord of the Rings. But he also goes into the south and east and finds out the hearts of men, both good and evil. Good and evil. There are in the east and in the south, in Middle-earth, good men. And now we've always actually known it, just from a plain reading of Lord of the Rings, we know that there were men of quality in the south and east. I'm thinking particularly of, at the Pelennor Fields, where, yes, they're wicked kings, but nonetheless there are kings who fight heroically to the death rather than surrender, perhaps because perhaps they don't believe the chance that there might be mercy. But they vindicate their honour. You, of course, have the great moment of Faramir looking at his human foe and wondering, how he's got here, basically. What loves did he have? Why has he been stranded here, dragged out here to fight a war he probably has no interest in? And we know that Aragorn has gone and, in fighting Sauron in the south and east, has met good men and women, and presumably he's helped them. And you think, okay, so he's apprenticed by Gandalf, and Gandalf went into the south. And Gandalf doesn't always have flattering names amongst people he's helping. Gandalf Stormcrow. So I think we can conclude two things. One, that Gandalf went to the south, we know that, certainly. But two, that he too, as his apprentice Aragorn did, went and discovered good men and women in the south and aided them in their attempts to limit Sauron. This, by the way, actually casts an extra light on one of the possibilities that Tolkien floated about the Blue Wizards, was that they'd gone off, and one was that they might have become petty kings themselves. Another could be they were corrupted by Sauron. But another yet is that they succeeded, but we don't know of their record because, they were far off in the east, getting the few good tribal chieftains and kings and philosophers and religious leaders to fight the good fight against Sauron. And that's all off screen. And perhaps we could say that Gandalf did some of the same in the south, that those good Haradrim who resisted the old corruptions of Sauron and of the Black Númenóreans were aided secretly by Incarnus and by, under a different guise, that exiled king from the north, Aragorn. Anyway, the thing I picked up, the thing I thought was interesting. If there's anything else to add to it, please do. Especially any etymology and stuff on things like Incarnus and Tharkun, actually, because I couldn't find anything on that. Tell me in the comments, and I will see you next time.